Welcome back to the Upper Tier Podcast, the football podcast we bring you each and every week on the Dynamo Podcast Network. Head over to YouTube, smash that subscribe and bell notification button. Audio versions of our show are also available on Anchor if you prefer it. And today we have a very special episode with a very special guest when we talk about League of Ireland royalty, absolute royalty here. We're talking about one and only Mr. Paul Osam. Paul, how are you, my man?
I'm very good. Thanks for that introduction. I hope I live up to that. I've never been called royalty. I've been called lots of things, but never royalty.
Not a bother at all. Listen, sure, when you look at the record, 6 leagues and 2 league cups, absolutely outstanding career in the league.
Well, Niall, I'm glad you said 6 because some of the records will say 5 because there was that controversial league title. I can't remember the year where, the records will actually say that we didn't win the league. We had points deducted. Through a clerical error where the player was incorrectly registered or not registered at all, and we ended up having, I think it was 10 points deducted, and finished up as runners-up that season. But to me and to most of the lads who played that year, we're not officially the league champions for that year, and we didn't get. Well, we actually did get replica medals, but for me, that's a league-winning season. But for me, even though we were rightfully deducted points because we broke a rule in relation to an administrative rule in relation to registering the player correctly.
Let's go back. Let's start kind of nearly at the beginning. 1988. You're playing for one of my old teams, Mount Merrion, and the call comes along or the contact is made from St. Pat's. Tell me how that all came about.
I was playing. I'd been through different phases of playing prior to that as a schoolboy, and I stopped playing and gave it up and came back and played for various different teams, and kind of lost with the desire, I suppose, to play, at that stage. And I think I was around 21 at the time, and I got approached by somebody from Mount Merrion to play. They were playing in I think it was the amateur league at the time. So I went along. It was more of a social club, and we go for a few jars in the Mount Merrion Inn after, and they were good lads, and we were mid-table side. But I remember toward the end of the season, and we played up in Deer Park against, I'm nearly sure it was St. Brendan's was the team from the north side, and they were going for the league, and they had a couple of players that were catching the League of Ireland clubs at the time, and I played in the game, and I had a good game, and we were in the Mount Merrion Inn after the game, and Maurice Lyons, who was the chairman of Mount Merrion at the time, came over to me and said, "There's a man here who wants to have a chat with you." And it turned out his name was Billy Baxter, and he was assistant manager of Pats at the time, and he asked me would I be interested in going down to Pats to do pre-season, and I said, "No, I'm not interested in playing at that level. I'm happy just playing socially. Don't want to get involved. Don't want to put time in." So he was persistent, and he got Brian Clough to ring me, and I think the final call to me came from a friend of yours who was on the show recently, Robbie Gaffney, who was a local fella who I would have looked up to greatly. Robbie, smashing player at the time, and played with Rovers, and he was with Pat at the time. And Robbie rang me and asked me, would I come down? You may as well come down, have a go. He said, I can pick you up, and we were training walking sound at the time, so I agreed to go, and that was the start of it, really, of my journey at St. Pat's.
It's mad how it comes about, though, isn't it? Like, it's just, from not really being that interested to suddenly Brian chasing you and Robbie Gaffney saying, "Come on, come down." You know what I mean? Yeah. Fantastic. So that's it. Hook up at St. Pat's. First session, 88 to 93, 91 appearances, 10 goals. And we're off and run. What's your memories from that time at St. Pat's when you went in? And
well, initially when I went in, I was playing with the reserve team. And Billy Baxter, he doubled up. He managed the reserve team, and he also was involved with the first team. So I played the majority of that first year with the reserve team. Don't think I was involved with the first team at all that year. Memory serves me right, but I know that again how your path kind of is mapped out for you. The start of the season we won the league, I think it was there 88, played 88, 89 in the reserves. 89, 90 I was involved with the first team squad, and I remember thinking I'll get a bit of experience here this season. I'll still play in the reserve team and travel with the first team and whatever. And the first game we played was in Limerick, I'm nearly sure it was Rat Band they played in at the time, and I was on the bench, and Robbie Gaffney, ironically, Robbie unfortunately broke his leg very, very early in the game. I can remember it vividly. He just got caught late in the tackle, and it looked innocuous enough at the time, but he broke his leg and he had to come off, and I replaced him in that game. And I went on then to make, I think I played in most games that year, maybe missed a couple of games or was left out for a couple of games, but would have been a regular in that season, and we won the league that year. So that was really the highlight of that period there. We went through kind of a barren spell after that. A lot of players left between 90 and 93 when I left. The spiral at that time, finances weren't good and players left, and yeah, so you know, a lot of players left in that period, as I was saying, between 90 and 93, and I've been asked to go to a couple of clubs on the back of, I suppose, the back of the success of the league winning side. Obviously, a lot of players were coveted by other clubs. Well, I stayed until 93, but the team wasn't very successful on the pitch, and off the pitch, it wasn't very stable. And I got an offer again from Rovers, so I decided at that time for my career, it was probably the best thing to do was to move on and try and continue on my progress as a player.
How did the move feel? Like, I mean, obviously you had experienced success at Pats there, and then obviously the move to Rovers. And I find when I talk to ex-League of Ireland players, like, it doesn't seem to be a huge issue when you move from, you know, like one Dublin team to another Dublin team. Whereas, you know, if you think about like the sort of passion with the fans and stuff like that and stuff, how did it feel moving to Rovers?
At the time, it was nothing, you know, just playing for a different club. There wasn't really that probably understanding of rivalry between fans. So I think for a player, it's probably more now, you know, when players move, particularly between Bows and Rovers now, there's probably a little bit, and you've got social media now as well, obviously, which probably wasn't around then. So you're not aware of any kind of animosity or anything like that, really, when you move clubs. So I don't think it's a big deal for a player because you're still doing the same thing, just in a different environment, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I spoke to James on the podcast, James Keddy, he was saying when he made the move that it was just, for as far as he was concerned, it was just a different pitch, and he just played on. You have to be professional. So tell us about the time at Rovers.
Well, time at Rovers, what was a strange time for me because I think we had a really, really good side. Look, I grew up in the area. In the Dundrum kind of Georgetown area, so Rovers would have been my club. I was a Rovers supporter when they were in Milltown, so it was nice to play for Rovers. Although Pats had given me the break, and I'm probably synonymous with Pats, and for obvious reasons, for the longevity I had at Pats. But I'd always have a soft spot for Rovers, you know. So to go and play for them at the time was a big thing for me, you know, to play for the club. And we had a really, really good side. We had a really great manager in the late Ray Tracy, Lord rest his soul. You know, Ray was very good initially to me. I found him really easy to play for. I thought he was really good with the players. And as I said, we had a really good side from Alan O'Neill, Gino Brazil, Peter Eccles, John Nolan. You know, we had midfield Derek Tracy, John Toll, Derek McGrath, Terry Evans, Stephen Gagan, Alan Byrne. We had a really, really good side, you know. Fantastic side. Chippy Kelly played at right back as well, so I'm not missing anybody. But we had a really good side, really, really good side, and we were bombing the league. I know we were playing in the RDS, and we were playing a lovely brand of football. It was really enjoyable to play in, scoring lots of goals, winning games comfortably. And for me, unfortunately, I tore my cruciate ligament game 18 against Monaghan United in the RDS. So that was a big blow for me in the season. Obviously, didn't play again that season. We went on to win the league, and it was a bittersweet kind of season for me because I had the injury, and it was quite a serious injury. Still is, but back then it was probably even more serious, and probably wasn't as much known about it in the rehab of of the injury, and there probably wasn't as much sports science behind, you know, the detail of rehab. So, yes, I had a rehab program, kind of left to your own devices to a certain degree. And look, there's lots of things happened. I had a disagreement with the club. I felt, rightly or wrongly at the time, that they didn't reward me in relation to give me a new contract because I was injured, which is their own prerogative. So between one thing and another, Tony Doherty, who was manager of Derry City at the time, he had been asking me to sign for Derry City during that period as well. So he got in touch with me when he heard my predicament, and I went up to Derry to do my rehab up there, and I stayed up there for a number of months doing rehab, but I couldn't play for them because I was still a Rovers player. So look, lots of things went on. I ended up having to come back to Dublin, and there was a pending court case because I was prevented from playing for anybody for a season because things happened at Rovers that they're documented anyway, but I don't want to go into them in great detail.
Yeah.
And I basically lost about 18 months to 2 years of football because of the injury and because of politics, if you want to call it that as well.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So that it was up to 1995 then when I was in no man's land. I had no club. I had a serious injury. I hadn't played in a couple of years, and luckily for me, Brian Kerr contacted me and asked me, offered me, you know, look, if you want to come down and do a bit pre-season down here with us, you can come down and get yourself into shape and we'll see how you are. So I was again, it was luck. It was luck in a way that Brian contacted me and got me back in, because I could have easily ended up, you know, just being on the scrap heap and not playing. But turned for me, luckily enough, and I went back down to Pats for 95 then, and I stayed there for whatever number of years after.
Yeah. How did you feel about the call? Were you ready to go back in, or were you still having questions about whether you really wanted it or not? Or were you chomping to get back at it when Brian made the call?
I did want it. I'd been in Derry, as I said, I'd done a lot of rehab up there with Tony Doherty, who I'll be forever grateful to. He was really good to me. He really looked out for me. And I felt, you know, that I wanted to go back playing, but I didn't really feel I was able to with the knee, because if I'm being completely honest, I probably didn't do my rehab correctly. I probably wasn't disciplined enough then. Again, the rehab protocol was probably slightly different to what it is now. What it is, because my own son unfortunately tore his a number of years ago, and I seen what he had to go through in relation to rehab, and it was microscopic, like, you know, in the detail what he had to do, and I don't recall having that kind of detail. So maybe, I know my knee was sore, even when I was up in Derry, and I thought, I don't know if I'd be able to play, and I wore the big bandage on it and things, the support. So I wasn't overly confident that I would be able to play, but I thought if I was going to be able to play, that Pats would be the best place for me to go to, because I was familiar with the surroundings there. I knew the people there. I felt like I'd be welcomed there as well, you know, and there'd be an understanding there as well. So that kind of, all of those factors led me to go back down, and it worked out well for me in the end.
Yeah. And obviously, I mean, there must have been a great relationship there with Brian. Was it that, like, I mean, that he made that call to bring you back in again and stuff like that? How was the relationship with Brian? It must have been fairly close, was it?
Well, I think, you know, as a manager, you're gonna have different kind of relationships with different players. I think fundamentally it's your job to get the best out of every single player. Whether you need to have a close relationship with the player for that to happen, it depends on the individual. I know with Brian, I had massive respect for him as a coach, as a manager, as a person at the time, and he certainly got the best out of me. I think Brian would have recognised that, you know, I can be good for Paul, Paul can be good for the club, Paul can be good for me, and that's the way it works, you know. It's a two-way street with all managers. Only a manager has to particularly have a great relationship with you or be a friend, but he's got to be able to work with you and have a working relationship that there's a reciprocal, you know, admiration or you know, that you give for them what they give for you, and that respect is there. So I wouldn't have had, you know, a brilliant relationship with Brian. I wouldn't have had a bad relationship with him. I'd had a relationship, a working relationship where we both respected each other.
Yeah, very good. So tell me about some of the memories then of the second stint at St. Pat's.
Yeah, the second stint was a long stint. It was 95 to 2004, I think. So it was 9 years, massively successful years. Was a lot of change in the club throughout that period, with Brian going to the association, doing fantastically well at the underage teams, going on to manage the national team. You had Liam Buckley, who was a player, coming in and managing. Then Liam gone, Pat Dolan coming in, Eamon Collins coming in. So there was an awful lot of change in relation to the managers over that period of time. But one thing that stayed consistent was the success within the group, and I think that was embedded in the kind of culture within the club at that time, whereby, and I think it was probably started really by Brian, and Pat Dolan as well, to all of the coaches. They signed Pat's players, and I know what that means. You'd have to be in that culture to understand that. There was a certain kind of individual that you had to be to play for St. Pat's. You didn't have to be the best player in the world, but you had to have certain characteristics, that you had a never die attitude. You'd go through the wall for each other. We had a great camaraderie between all the players, so it was a real homely, family kind of atmosphere within the club, and they're well known for that, the fans as well. But that was throughout the team. Like, there were no cliques, absolutely no cliques in any of the teams I played with in St. Pat's. There was probably toward the end a younger crew and an older crew, but even with that, we all mixed. Like, I was good pals with so many younger fellas in the group. So we always had that kind of togetherness throughout that period in the club, and I think that was massively instrumental in the success that we had throughout that period.
Yeah, so the 98-99 season particularly sticks out, where you won the league, but you also picked up a couple of individual awards. Talk to me about that season, the Players Award, the Journalists Award.
Yeah, look, I'll be completely honest with you. I don't remember. I couldn't tell you what year that was. If you said it to me and you asked me what year was that, I'd probably retrace it and think, well, it must have been that year because you won league. But like the whole period, the whole journey there was like just one big period of time, and I don't really differentiate years, and I'm being honest with that. Obviously, there were the early ones and the later ones, which I could tell you, well, this happened early on, this happened later on, but that kind of period, there was a period of about 4 or 5 years there where, not that I didn't know what was happening, but it was just constant. It was relentless. It was winning games. It was a challenge for titles. It was winning honours. It was winning Player of the Year. And it just happened, And I didn't dwell on it at the time, and I only spoke to somebody recently about this. And when I look back now, like, it's always easy looking back. Like, there were great occasions and fantastic achievements, but I never looked at them, particularly the individual awards. I've said this on a number of occasions. You won't win an individual award without a team around you, So they're great to have, and it is a great achievement, and it's better now, far better now for me to be able to look and say, I won Player of the Year, I won the international award, the international. There was 3 awards actually in that year. Soccer Writers, the Players, and then there was the Opal, I think it was at the time, and I won all 3. But at the time, when I won all 3 at that time, I never looked and said, I'm after winning the 3 of them. That never really resonated with me. It was just, it was nothing really, It's just we were winning, and it was more important that the team was successful and the club was successful around those times. So it's kind of a blur in relation to identifying dates and years and seasons throughout the whole period, because it was just so successful and so enjoyable. It was like just a journey that we went on together, with the club.
Well, they say that about successful teams, that they're so driven and they're always looking forward that they don't have time to enjoy the moment at that time and stuff. So, yeah, absolutely. So then you mentioned, obviously, 2001, 2002, you win the league, but you docked 10 points or 15 points, I think it was, for fielding an unregistered player. What was the feeling at that time?
It was one of great disappointment initially. But then it was soon, I think, most of the players who would have played, I think it was soon, and I go back to that whole togetherness that we just said, look, there's nothing we can do about this. It's out of our control. And there was a clerical error made and an administrative error made. But look, what we achieved on the pitch, we're champions. We were the best team on the pitch again. Probably for the 4th time in 6 years, we accumulated the most number of points on the pitch. So the fact that we didn't win the league that year, officially, we did in our minds, and we celebrated as if we won the league. And I've said this on a number of occasions as well. Medals to me are just materialistic things. I couldn't tell you where my league medals are, but I can tell you that the memories of winning the leagues are embedded in your head. You know, the joy that you experienced at the time will never leave you. You know, it's always there with you. So that was a bittersweet year for us. I think it was probably the best season we had, believe it or not, in relation to how we played. I think the number of points we accumulated, could be wrong, would have been right up there with a record number if we hadn't been deducted points. There was probably a little bit of pressure taken off us because I think there was still a number of games to go when we were deducted points. So it would have been very, very difficult for us to win the league. I don't think we mathematically could win it after the points were deducted.
Yeah.
Unless Shelbourne had a calamitous collapse. But I think we won the last 5 games of that season comfortably, playing really good football. I can remember, I'm nearly sure it was Derry City we played in Inchicore, and I was fortunate enough to score. And then I can remember celebrating with Eamon as if we'd won the league, you know. And that was just a game. That was just a game in the run into a season that we couldn't win. But still, we celebrated that. I personally remember scoring and running over to the sideline and celebrating as if we'd won the league. So the whole thing of the deduction of points didn't affect us. It may have taken a little bit of pressure off us, but at the end of that season, when we looked at it, we were the best team. We got the most points on the pitch. Yes, there was an error made in relation to a registration, so we're going to be punished. That's life. Let's get on with it, you know. But we didn't dwell on it. And as I said, that's you rightly said at the start. 6 league medals, so there's 5 probably on an official record, but there's 6 in there, and I don't know where any of them are.
Yeah. Well, any of the official places I looked up has 6, so that's a good sign anyway. So that's a testament to the team, really, you know. And then obviously the European spot, Shell's got the European spot. Was that the period then? Was that the trigger really for Shells? Did they kick on then, and then they started seeing some success at that stage? Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, I think there was always that era, that late era in my playing days. It was always ourselves, Cork and Shells. I think it was always the 3 of us challenging. Never a huge amount between us. And yeah, you could be right. I think Wesley started playing toward the end of my days with Pats. Wesley was in the team. Tony Sheridan had come in. They kicked on from that. I don't know whether that was the catalyst for them to kick on, the fact that they won that league that year. I think that would have happened anyway, you know, because they were kind of developing into a really, really good side at that time. And we were probably coming toward the end of an era where we had been massively successful, and there was a big change in relation to players. And, you know, some players had left and some players were coming toward the end of their careers. And I think it's a natural cycle within clubs. I don't think, you know, in too many countries, the one club is dominant throughout a massive period. I think you get cycles of where 2 or 3 clubs dominate, and then they might fall off a little bit and somebody else dominates, and that cycle just continues on.
Yeah, I skipped over one thing I wanted to mention. Weight Watchers. Talk to me about Weight Watchers. I had to mention it. It's mentioned it was the first time a League of Ireland player had been involved in a nationwide advertising campaign. Talk to me about that and how that all came about.
Well, Pat Dolan was manager, and you know, Pat was great for me. He really was. Huge time for Pat, and huge admiration for him, and probably didn't at the time. You know, I probably didn't really appreciate at the time, but how good he was for me in my career. But there was a period in my career where, you know, maybe I was putting on a little bit too much padding for the winter, trying to keep me warm, you know. So Pat recognised this, and he kind of got on my case a little bit, you know. And I think it was around the time when I was due a testimonial as well, and Pat would have been very strategic, you know, and saying to me, you mightn't play much this year. And look, I was getting to an age where it was harder to keep the pounds off as well. And I can remember thinking to myself, geez, I better get myself in shape here. So my wife at the time, well, she's still my wife, not my wife at the time, would have, as many women did, and probably still do, attend Weight Watchers occasionally. And I don't know whether she said to me, look, why don't you try this? There's a plan you can do, and you eat so many pints a day, and you just watch what you're eating and that and what have you. So I think between her saying that to me, and then I might have said to Pat, listen, Pat, I'm going to try this Weight Watchers thing. And of course, then Pat's head, he's thinking, how can I make this, get a little bit of publicity out of this? So I think he contacted Weight Watchers Ireland and said, look, one of my players, he's a superstar. Pat would have had me as the superstar.
Brilliant.
He's on your program, you know. I think it'd be great for your program if you highlight the fact that this player. So Pat came to me and I was mortified. He said, listen, we'll do a piece of Weight Watchers and they want you to go in. I had to go into some studio and a suit and everything, and they took pictures of me. And there was a supplement with the RTE guide, I think, back at that time. And look, this is part of me history that I've kind of buried, so it's not too much to the forefront. But I can remember the RTE guide. There was a supplement magazine with it that week, and there's me on the front page in my James Bond suit. You know, the headline is League of Ireland star joins Weight Watchers or something like that. Now there wasn't as much to it as met the eye. It was a bit of a publicity stunt and it was a bit gimmicky. But to be fair, like to look on the real, you know, the reality side of this in relation to Pat Dolan as a manager, Pat to me was and still is the best motivator I've ever come across in relation to. You know, you've got to understand the game as well, and notwithstanding that, but in relation to motivating players and getting the best out of players and making players believe in themselves, he was beyond his years. You know, he was really, really good.
Yeah, it's mad to think the thinking, isn't it? Like you rocking in saying, I'm going to try this Weight Watch, and he's going, how can the club get a little bit out of this now? Hang on a minute.
Very good sponsorship as well. I think they did. They had some link up with the Weight Watchers.
Brilliant. Gas. So 2003, again, win the League Cup. Eamon Collins is in there, your captain on the side, win the League Cup and narrowly miss out on the FAI Cup. What was your memories of the two cup runs?
The League Cup, not too much. If I'm right, we may have won a two-legged final against, I'm not too sure, maybe UCD, or maybe that was a semi-final. But I'm being honest, it's not something that I look back on. You know, cups, and it's not an excuse, cups to me weren't massively important because, you know, any team can win the cup. I'm not belittling the competition, but it really is an opportunity for a team that's maybe not top team to win a trophy. I would have loved to win an FAI Cup, don't get me wrong. It's something that I've never done, and if I was looking at a collection, you know, of achievements, it's not there for me and it's missing. I don't remember a huge amount about the League Cup victory. The FAI Cup was the Longford one, I think it was, in the Aviva in Lansdowne Road at the time. I can remember that, and my memories of that were that I'm on my last legs here, you know. That certainly wouldn't have said it to too many people at the time, but I can remember not being able, in the Lansdowne was a big pitch, it'd be bigger than the pitches we normally played on. And I can remember that game and saying, I can't do this for much more. I can't do this much longer. I'm not able to, you know where you want to get to, you know what you want to do, you know what area the pitch should be in. We just can't get there. And you're fatigued and you're aching, and it wasn't very nice for me. It wasn't very enjoyable. I didn't really enjoy it. And you lose as well, you know, which doesn't help. I think Keith Fahey got a red card early on in that game, and which compounded for me the amount of ground you had to cover as well. So not a good memory. Don't have too many good memories of the FAI Cup because 96 was similar. On the flip side, Shelbourne had a man sent off and we failed to capitalise on that. So the cups, I don't have, the FAI Cup I don't have really no fond memories of it because we lost in two finals, and the last final, aside from the fact we lost it, it was really probably the point in my career where I thought, I'm at the end of the road here now.
Yeah. So we'll raise the mood here. Let's go back and talk about the testimonial, and we'll talk about, now our listeners and viewers will know this man won Paul McGrath. Talk to me about the testimonial.
Well, the testimonial was, you know, given to me, granted to me by Pat, as I alluded to earlier on, and you know, I'd known Paul. I hadn't known Paul very well. I met him a couple of times, so I got a number for him, and I rang. Just rang, and his wife answered, and she was very reluctant, you know, to agree to him coming over for reasons which were probably obvious at the time, you know. But between the jigs and the rails, Paul said, "Oh, I'm coming," and he contacted me and he said, "Listen, I'd love to play in the game. I'm really honoured to come over and play in the game with you." So yeah, set up. He came over and we played Rovers, selection Rovers. Mick Leach, who was a Rovers legend, who all the particularly supporters of a certain era would be really familiar with Mick. Mick was probably, I don't know what age Mick is now because he still looks 21 and I say he's in great nick, but he played in the game and he must have been pushing on 50, I'd say, at the time. I hope I'm not being overestimating his age, but no, Mick was a great fella. I knew Mick well at that time. I used to see him around in different jobs I worked in and things, and Mick played and a few different Rovers people came back, and Damien Richardson managed that team, and Brian came in. I think Cyril Walsh maybe helped out managing. I think Brian managed the team for me, but that's and yeah, Paul came in and we picked him up at the airport. Myself and pal of mine came and he stayed the night, and he headed back off then. But it was great honour, and I've got some great photographs and some great memories in the dressing room with Paul and him playing in the game. And even at then, he was a fantastic player. Gentleman came back to. We had a bit of a celebration back in the city centre. He didn't hang around. He came in. He didn't want to be around the temptation of having to, have a drink and that. And he said, "Listen, I'd love you to come down, Paul, we had a private function in a club." And he said, "I'll come in." He said, "But I'm not staying." So we came in and showed his face, stayed for half an hour, had a couple of glasses of water, and then he was gone. He went off to, I think, to wherever he was staying, and that was that. But brilliant time for me. For my family as well at the time. It was great. It was great honour to be given a testimonial by the club.
Yeah, and an absolute icon of Irish football, really, so fantastic. Move on then, start moving out and moving into coaching, and also some media work. How was the transition into media work?
Well, the media work came about just by default, really. It wasn't something that I ever planned to do or anything like that. I think I was asked would I do co-commentary on a match for the radio, and I said I'd love to do it, done it. And then I think the Aircom League Weekly was on TV3 at the time, and somebody couldn't make it. And it was just by being in the right place at the right time, I think, or just by default. I was asked would I sit in one night, and I went and done it. And then I'd done it for a couple of years and I really enjoyed it. And then the programme left and the change channel. I went to different, it was no longer on TV3. I went to RTE, and they got in their own people to do that show, which is fine, But I enjoyed it. It was good. It was good for a couple of years. It was very late at night. That was the only thing. It was on after 11 o'clock, and it was difficult at the time sometimes, but I enjoyed it because it kept you. Had to keep you focusing on the game because you had to be aware of the systems of play. You had to be aware of what you were talking about when you were making a point on TV. So you had to study the game somewhat. Well, not somewhat. You had to study the game, and it probably helped me in relation to I was coaching as well at the time into that whole environment of analysing and studying the game and getting a better understanding of the game.
Yeah, so it would have helped greatly in the commentary and in the show as well, obviously, yeah. How was the transition into coaching? Had you always got an eye on coaching when you were playing, or again, did it come about, or did you always want to get involved in coaching?
No, I didn't. And I think, if you asked any of the coaches that I played under, or even any of the players I played with, would I be a coach or would I be a manager? They'd say no. No, I'm sure the unanimous thing would be no, you wouldn't, because probably when I played, I didn't really care as much about the game. I was very kind of laid back. Nothing really fazed me in relation to the game. Didn't get overly excited about it. Didn't get overly down. So I probably, when I finished playing, didn't want to just stop being involved in the game. And at the time, in my mind, the only way to do that was probably to become a coach. But little did I understand then how difficult that would be. And I had no idea, and only until quite recently, it probably took me 10 years, of thinking I was a coach, of thinking I was coaching, to realising you're actually not, So the transition is extremely difficult if you want to be successful, or if you're going to be successful, because coaching is completely different to playing. You know, there are parallels in relation to it's the game, but the actions and the implementation of playing and the implementation of coaching are completely different. They're miles apart, you know. So there's no such thing as a former player or a former great player being a great coach. That's not just a natural progression. It can happen, and it has happened, but it's probably not happened more times than it has happened.
So then you come down and you coach my local club, Bray Wanderers. You'll see the scarf there in the background. What was it like, the transition down to Bray, down to the seaside?
Well, I was working with Pats with the under 21 team at the time, and I was there as assistant coach and then head coach, and then I felt the pathway for me as a coach probably wasn't there at the time. And when I look back, probably correctly, because I wasn't qualified enough. I didn't have my licenses. I thought I could live off the back of having played for the club and being, if you want to call it, a legend at the club. That doesn't buy anything really. But I thought, well, look, I played here. I was a good player. I've done really well. They should give me a job. I should be the manager of the first team nearly, you know. But that's not the way the world works. So at the time, I probably got a little bit thick, and I said, I'm leaving. And I contacted Eddie Gormley, who I played with Pats, and he was at Bray. And I said, listen, an opportunity comes up? And he said, yeah, I could do it with somebody else. Keith was there. Keith Long was his assistant. And Eddie said, look, you can come down and give Keith a hand. So I stayed there, went down there, and had 2 enjoyable seasons there with Bray. Started to learn a lot of things then. Started to really realise, you know, this is senior football. This is the Premiership of our country. I think Keith and Eddie had both done their A license at that time, and I hadn't. And I started to realise you've got to be really organised. You've got to be really prepared. You've got to be detailed here to players. It's not just about. I started to really see a lot of things there that opened my eyes, really, you know, into the whole process. So I stayed for 2 years, and then I got a job in the FAI as a development officer. So I left Bray and I went and concentrated on the job in the FAI. And that's really where I kind of started to develop, I suppose, as I have a real interest in the whole coaching process and developing myself as a coach. Really probably started from there, because I was exposed now, because, you know, I worked for the FAI. I worked as a development officer. I didn't work as a football coach. I worked in Westmead. I was working on a lot of different programs, social inclusion programs, schools programs, summer camps, you know, girls camps. So it wasn't a coaching job as such, but there was one aspect of the job which enabled you to coach, and that was working on the emerging talent program with the elite players. So Niall Harrison, who's the head of that program, asked me would I like to work on one of the centres in Mullingar. It was in my region, and I said I'd love to. So this was now I was really being exposed and really coming out. I had to come out of my comfort zone, because now I had to coach. Now I was the coach. I was no longer able to hide behind, you know, anybody else, and I was under the spotlight. And that's when I realised that it's that whole cycle of being recognising that you're unconsciously incompetent, because I realised what I didn't know and what I couldn't do. And I think once that happened, and it was a career changing instant for me. I'm not going to go into it, but an instant occurred whereby I was completely exposed, and I was stripped, and I thought, shit, it's sink or swim here now for me. So I decided I need to go back and I need to educate myself properly, reintroduce myself to coach education. I had done my B license many years previous, but I was way out of tune with common training, common coaching methods and how to educate players. And you can't just tell a player to do something. I felt, why can you not just do this? I could do it, but that's not right. No player like you are, and every player is different, and every player has different needs, and as the coach you need to recognise that. So I worked really, really hard. I worked extremely hard on my coaching, on my education. I done my A licence, and soon after that I was lucky enough to get the job on the 16 international teams, the head coach, in 2015, and I went back and done my pro licence then in 2016 and finished that in 2018. So I've just continually tried to develop myself as a coach, and I got a job then working in coach education within the association, which embellished everything then, because I was constantly having to be on the ball now, and I was now a tutor, tutoring coaches, which is again is a different skill set. So you know, I'm very proud of where I'm at the minute and what I've achieved, and I'm grateful to a number of people who've given me the opportunity to be where I am today. And I'm massively honoured to manage our head coach, the national men's under 16 team, and I'm very, very satisfied with where I'm at the moment. Other than obviously thing with COVID, and there's no action, or hasn't been for the last years or so. But that's there's more important things, and that is true. There are more important things in life than football, and one of those is the health of the nation. Fortunately, we're in a position to be able to contribute to prevent the spread of the disease.
Yeah. How would you compare the coaching, say, of a day-to-day club, if you like, let's say like a Bray Wanderers or a St. Pat's? How would you compare that dynamic to, say, the coaching of an international side? Is it a very different dynamic in terms of like the time frame you have with the players and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's extremely. I won't say it's extremely difficult. It's obviously more difficult with an international team because there are a number of facets. You don't have the players all the time. You have much less contact with the players. You've got to prepare the players in a really short period of time. The players are coming from different clubs where they may play different systems of play, different styles of play. They may be asked to do different things at their club. So it's very, very challenging. It's very, very challenging. I'm not saying it's easier or it's harder. With a club on a day-to-day basis, that has its own challenges and brings different challenges. So there are different sets of challenges. I know at a club level, sometimes you have so much time. It's difficult at times to get, what will I do in this period? And you might end up just doing stuff for the sake of doing it. Whereas our time is so vital at international level that every single minute of every single session of every single team meeting is vital in relation to preparing the team for the game. So the different challenges, though, I wouldn't say one is more difficult than the other, but they're just two different sets of challenges.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, the difference in the time available obviously makes it that more dynamic, that you have to use every single minute you can. You have to hit the ground running. You can't waste any time at all because of that shortened time frame that you have with them. Absolutely brilliant talking to you, but we can't let you off the hook yet. We always get a few little questions in at the end that we spitfire at people. Hard one to call because I know you played with so many great players. A favorite player or players that you played with? Who sticks out in your mind?
That I played with. I would say probably if I pick one I only played for two clubs, so probably at Rovers. I always remember Peter Eccles at Rovers. Pete was centre half. He was fantastic. He was a character. He was a character off the pitch. Good lad, a bit of humour in him, but what a player he was, and he organised things so well, and without probably even realising that he'd done it, he brilliant way about him. I would have been a younger player obviously at the time, and he was great for that whole organisation he was a centre half, so we could see everything in front of him obviously, and I think he got cap. Not got one or two caps of the senior team, but he was, to me, one of the players that was probably most underrated that I ever played with, because he was a smashing player and a great lad as well. At Pats, there were so many good players that played at Pats, and I'm not just saying that, but when you win 5 or 6 league titles in a career over a 10-year period, you have to have played with a multitude of great players. So there were so many, different eras as well, because I probably went through 3 years perhaps with different players. Probably Mark Ennis in the early days. I mean, when I went there first, he'd score a goal out of nothing. He wouldn't be seen for the game. Be innocuous, and all of a sudden then, boom, goal, 1-0 on the bus, 3 points. Mark was massively effective in that era. I'd have to say Eddie Gormley at Pats in that kind of mid-era. Eddie was just a fantastic player. Both feet, could tackle, he could head the ball, he could run, he could score goals, he took free kicks. He was absolutely driven to be successful. He was infectious around the group. Sometimes, as he'd say, now he looked back himself maybe a little bit too much at times, but some people would look and they might go into the shell a bit with Eddie, but he meant well, and he was. If I had to say that the best player I played with throughout my career. I'd have to say Eddie. I'd have to say Eddie Gorman.
Very good. A lot of people would say that you scored a number of key goals that sent Pats on certain runs. But if you had to pick one, if I put you on the spot here to give me what your favourite goal was, or most influential, if you like.
Well, yeah, there are two, and it's ironic. They're very similar. They're very similar in their magnitude and importance. And they were quite similar as well in relation. They were both headed goals to put us on a path to win the league, and they were years apart. One was '89 in Derry when I can't remember again the exact details, but I know we played Derry toward the end of the season, and they were ahead of us, and I think we had a game in hand, and it was nearly, if they won that game, it was going to be really, really difficult for us to catch them. And I was fortunate enough to score a headed goal. John Tracy, and still very vivid in my mind. Tim Dalton was in goal for Derry. Derry were the kings at this time. I think they'd won leagues, trebles. They did a fantastic side lit with really, really top players. And like for me at that age, going to the Brandywell in my first season, playing in the league and scoring the winning goal, looking back now, was monumentous. At the time, it was big for me at the time because it was so early in my career. Well, I know we went on to win the league that year after that game when we won 1-0 in the Brandywell. That was the catalyst, I think, was that year. And probably, I don't know, some 10 years later, I'm not sure that the season, again, I'd go back to being so clouded that I can't put dates on things, but it was the year we beat Cork. We pipped Cork for the league title, so I don't know what year it was, but late 90s it would have been, I'm sure. And we played in Inchy Cork again. I think it was the second last game of the season, I think, or the third last, and they were a point ahead of us, or we were level on points. But I know whoever won that game was odds on to win the league then. So similar situation. Corner kick was taken. I think Martin Russell took it. I remember Martin Riley heading the ball back across. And again, you're fortunate. Are you fortunate to be in the right place at the right time, or is it a sense of, you know, picking up good positions? I don't know, but I was there anyway to nod it in at the back post, and we won that game 1-0, and we won the league as well that year. So they're probably two. I was to look back and say what goals are the most important. I would say those two goals, and they were years apart. I think they might have been 10 years apart, and very similar in their magnitude, as I said, and the importance of them.
Yeah, you don't give yourself enough credit. I'm saying you picked up good positions. I'm not putting it down to luck whatsoever. The last one is always one that you have to have a bit of a think about. If you could spend an evening and have dinner with anyone, alive or deceased, who would it be?
That I've met?
Either you met or anyone worldwide. Doesn't even have to be involved in football. If you could have dinner one evening with anyone, alive or deceased, who would it be?
Has anyone never answered this question?
No, but they've always taken a bit of time to answer it, so there's no rush at all. Take your time.
God, it's a fair one, all right. I know I was asked this question before, years ago. A similar question. It was if I could spend a transatlantic, travel on a transatlantic flight, who in the world would I most like sit beside and spend that journey with? Yeah. And I said Madonna at the time, and I nearly got divorced. So I'll have to be very, very careful in how I answer this one for you. No, idols, people that I admire. God, I don't know. You've got me there. You've got me stumped. How long have we got?
Take your time. There's no rush.
What's the question again? If I could go for dinner?
If you could have dinner one evening with anyone alive or deceased worldwide, who would it be? I suppose you have to start. Would it be someone involved in football, or would it be someone outside of football, maybe?
I'm trying to think, because I never really, I'm going to try and get myself out of this question. I never really supported any club. Like, I'm genuine, and even today, I don't have a favourite team. So I would have never looked at any players and said, he's my favourite player. I would have just admired a multitude of players playing at different clubs and different eras. So I wouldn't have an idol in relation to football. I would admire loads. I don't really watch movies. Don't have a movie star. I'd have to say my wife.
Tell you, that's a good answer. Very, very good answer to get you off the hook.
I'll come back to you privately on that one and have a think
Yeah,
about it.
absolutely. Come back to me on it, yeah. It's always one. We don't like to give it out beforehand because we like the reaction, you know.
Yeah. You actually have me just completely gone there now in that. No, I can't. Sorry,
Yeah.
my wife is going to have to take that mantle for the time being. Until I can come up with someone better.
Always a good choice. Well,
I'll take it for the Madonna one, won't it?
That's it, yeah. I'll have to put up Living on a Prayer or something, or like, yeah, one of those songs from her or something like that. Well, as always, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for taking the time to come on. I know it's difficult during these times as well. I mean, football's kind of on hold and stuff like that, and everyone's trying to figure out how we get everyone back at it and get everyone back at it safe. So, as always, head over to YouTube, Dynamo Podcast Network. Head over there, smash that subscribe and bell notification button. Also, Anchor will have the audio version of the show. This has been our episode with League of Ireland legend and FAI coach Paul Osam. Paul, pleasure. Thanks a million for coming on.
No, you're more than welcome. Really enjoyed it. Thanks very much for having me on. Cheers.
Thanks a lot.